The sound that fills the air is not the organized din of battle, but the chaotic and shameful clamor of panic. The Roman legion, the pride of the city, broken and humiliated on the open field, flees in a disordered stampede across the narrow wooden bridge leading to the safety of Rome's walls. Behind them, advancing relentlessly, a tide of dust, bronze, and iron threatens to engulf them, the victorious Etruscan army. Amidst this torrent of cowardice, a lone figure stops. A Roman officer, Horatius Cocles, plants himself in the middle of the bridge, turns his back on his terrified city and his fleeing countrymen, and single-handedly faces the approaching army. The roar of thousands of enemies draws near, but Horatius remains motionless, a boulder of defiance against a tide of terror. The legendary defense of the Sublician Bridge by Horatius Cocles was not an act of superhuman strength, nor the feat of a demigod torn from the pages of mythology. It was an act of pure tactical genius and of a symbolic courage so powerful it was seared into the very soul of Rome. By transforming the narrow entrance of the bridge into a deadly funnel, a perfect choke point, he made the enemy's overwhelming numerical superiority utterly irrelevant. More importantly, his solitary, defiant, and suicidal stand bought the most precious commodity in any battle, more valuable than gold or steel: time. Time for his brothers in arms to destroy the bridge behind him and save the city. This is not just the story of one man against an army. It is the chronicle of the exact moment when the newborn Roman Republic forged its identity on the anvil of desperation. It is the tale of how the virtue of a single citizen became the shield of an entire civilization. The deed of Horatius became the cornerstone of a new ideal, the proof that liberty is not defended with walls of stone, but with the unbreakable courage of men willing to die for it. His legend is not a fairy tale. It is the instruction, manual on how a nation, on the brink of the abyss, can find salvation in the spirit of a single individual. The hero of this story was not a general, nor a consul, nor a man destined for greatness by the oracles. He was Horatius Cocles, whose cognomen means the one-eyed, a Roman patrician of minor rank, a junior officer in the military hierarchy. He was not driven by the ambition for glory, but by a sense of duty so ingrained and absolute that it was indistinguishable from his very being. Roman virtues in its purest form. His emotional state on that bridge was not fear, but a mixture of ice-cold fury at the cowardice of his countrymen and an iron resolve as hard as his shield to die at his post rather than take a single step back. He was an ordinary man elevated to the status of legend by one extraordinary decision. The composition of his army was the simplest and most desperate in military history. A single man, a lone legionary against an entire army. His motivation was equally pure and powerful: to protect the fragile and newborn Roman Republic. The deposed king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, the last tyrant of Rome, was marching with the enemy army, attempting to restore his monarchy and crush the Roman experiment in freedom. For Horatius, this was not the defense of a piece of land or a few buildings. It was the defense of an idea. It was the struggle of the Republic against tyranny, of liberty against servitude, of the citizen against the subject, the giant. In this story was Lars Porsena, the powerful king of the Etruscan city of Clusium. He was a consummate monarch, self-assured, leading a victorious army to restore an allied king to his throne and, in the process, to subdue the arrogant city of Rome. His mindset was one of a swift, inevitable, and crushing victory. His army was a massive Etruscan force. Though ancient sources do not provide exact figures, it was large enough to have defeated a Roman consular legion in open battle moments before. Its strength lay in its disciplined heavy infantry and an overwhelming confidence born of recent victory and the sight of its enemies fleeing in terror. However, Porsena's greatest strength also harbored his fatal flaw, a blind spot born of arrogance. He did not understand the psychology of symbolic warfare. Seeing a single man defy his entire army, Porsena and his champions did not perceive it as a simple tactical problem to be solved with a shower of arrows or javelins. Instead, they saw it as a direct challenge to their honor, a personal affront. Rather than using their ranged superiority, they chose to accept the challenge on the Romans' terms, sending their finest warriors to face him in single combat. They fell directly into Horatius's trap, playing the very game he wanted them to play, a game where numbers did not matter. The true battlefield was not the plain, but the structure that crossed it, the Pons Sublicius. This bridge, the only one crossing the Tiber River and leading directly into the heart of Rome, became the central character of the story, as important as Horatius himself. Built entirely of wood, its narrowness was Horatius's armor. It prevented the vast Etruscan army from outflanking him, forcing it to engage him on a front barely 2 or 3 men wide. At the same time, its wooden construction was Rome's only desperate hope, as it meant it could be destroyed. On that crucial day, the Sublician Bridge was simultaneously the weakest point in Rome's defense and its greatest strength. The stroke of genius, the moment of tactical clarity that changed history, was Horatius's realization that the impending battle would not be won with swords, but with axes. While the entire legion ran towards the safety of the walls, he ran in the opposite direction towards mortal danger. As he crossed the bridge against the tide of his own men, he not only prepared to fight, but he shouted an order that sealed his fate and that of Rome. He yelled to the engineers and soldiers left behind to destroy the bridge, to tear it down behind him. He was not fighting to defeat the Etruscan army. That was impossible. He was fighting to buy time for the carpenters. As the Roman legionaries fled in panic, Horatius planted himself at the entrance to the bridge and unleashed his most unexpected weapon, shame. In a voice that boomed over the chaos, he berated them, called them cowards, reminded them of their gods, their ancestors, and their forgotten duty. His words, sharp as his gladius, cut through the tide of fear. But it was his example, the sight of a single man willing to face an army, that finally stopped 2 of them. Inspired by his suicidal courage, 2 patricians, Spurius Lartius and Titus Herminius, turned back and joined him. The one had become 3. A thin line of 3 men formed at the end of the bridge, a human bulwark against the coming storm. The first Etruscan assault, a wave of confident champions expecting an easy slaughter, crashed against this unexpected wall of defiance. The Etruscan leaders, stunned by an audacity that bordered on madness, fell into Horatius's psychological trap. Instead of ordering their archers and slingers to sweep the bridge from a distance, an act that would have ended the fight in seconds, they sent their fiercest warriors to engage the 3 Romans in duels of honor. In the narrow passage of the bridge, numerical superiority meant nothing. It was a combat of 3 against 3, and then 3 against 1, over and over again. Horatius and his companions, protected by their large shields and fighting shoulder to shoulder, were an impregnable fortress. The Etruscan champions fell one after another, their bodies thrown into the Tiber or piled at the defenders' feet. Each fallen warrior only increased the frustration and hesitation of the attacking army. They could not understand how 3 men could stop thousands. The Romans' audacity had paralyzed them, turning their assault into a series of disjointed duels instead of a coordinated attack. Meanwhile, behind the 3 heroes, the rhythmic sound of Roman axes striking the bridge's timbers was a promise of salvation and a death sentence for the defenders. Time was running out. Suddenly, the structure of the bridge began to creak and groan under the blows of the Roman axes. The beams splintered, the supports trembled. Horatius, feeling the vibrations of imminent destruction beneath his feet, knew the moment had come. With the same authority with which he had halted the rout, he now ordered his 2 brave companions to retreat to the safety of the Roman bank while he covered their withdrawal. Spurius Lartius and Titus Herminius, though reluctant to abandon their comrade, obeyed. They ran across the shaking bridge, leaving Horatius utterly alone. Now he was truly alone. Wounded, exhausted, his shield battered and his armor stained with blood, he faced the entire Etruscan army. The enemies. Anger and frustration were palpable. There was no longer any honor, only an overwhelming desire to kill the one man who had humiliated them. Horatius braced for the final onslaught, knowing that his only escape route was about to be destroyed forever. This was his all-or-nothing moment, the instant when his life would be measured against the survival of the Republic. The final Etruscan charge came just as a deafening roar sounded from behind him. With a colossal crack, the Sublician Bridge split apart and collapsed into the turbulent waters of the Tiber River. A collective cry rose from the Etruscan ranks, a mixture of impotent frustration and, perhaps, a touch of grudging admiration. Their path to Rome was cut off. Horatius, now trapped on the broken end of the bridge on the enemy bank, found himself completely surrounded, his mission accomplished. With the bridge gone, his duty as a soldier was over. He turned, ignoring the army before him, and offered a brief, solemn prayer to Father Tiber, the river god. He asked the god to receive a Roman soldier and his arms into his sacred waters. Then, without hesitation, in full armor, he leaped backward, plunging into the current. The Etruscan army could only watch, stunned and helpless, as their lone foe disappeared beneath the surface. Under a shower of spears and javelins that splashed harmlessly in the water around him, Horatius swam. Every stroke was an act of defiance. He fought against the weight of his armor, his wounds, and the strong current of the Tiber. Finally, against all odds, he reached the Roman shore, where he was greeted not as a mere soldier, but as a living hero, the embodiment of Rome itself. He had entered into immortality. The defense by Horatius was not a conventional battle, so casualty statistics are unknown and ultimately irrelevant. The outcome was not measured in the number of bodies lying on the bridge, but in the meters of destroyed timber and the precious minutes won for Rome. The city had been saved from direct assault and immediate sack. One man's sacrifice had ensured the survival of hundreds of thousands. Lars Porsena, the Etruscan king, was thwarted in his attempt at a quick victory. Horatius's act forced him to abandon his plan of direct assault and begin a long and difficult siege of the city. This siege, in turn, gave rise to other legends of Roman heroism, such as those of Mucius Scaevola and Cloelia. In the end, Porsena's campaign to restore Tarquinius to the throne failed. Rome, thanks to the time Horatius had bought, survived. The deepest impact of Horatius's deed was cultural and psychological. His act of solitary defiance became the cornerstone of the Roman concept of virtus, a word encompassing courage, duty, excellence, and self-sacrifice for the greater good of the state. He became the personification of the ideal that a citizen's responsibility to the Republic stood above his own life. This idea would be the fuel that powered Rome's expansion for the next several centuries. The story of Horatius at the bridge became a foundational legend, an essential myth taught to every generation of Romans. It was the ultimate proof that a single citizen, moved by an unshakable sense of duty, could literally save the Republic. It became the gold standard by which all future Roman heroes, from Cincinnatus to Scipio Africanus, would be judged. It was the eternal reminder that the strength of Rome lay not in its legions, but in the character of its citizens. The immediate impact on the morale of both armies was as decisive as the destruction of the bridge. For the Etruscans, the sight of a single man halting their advance and swimming to safety instilled a sense of superstitious dread. They were facing not just men, but a new kind of civic fervor that seemed superhuman. Porsena's frustration was immense. The victory within his grasp had slipped away, forcing him to completely reassess his strategy. The ensuing siege was a draining and costly affair, a war of attrition instead of the lightning conquest he had anticipated. Horatius's audacity had transformed a Roman rout into a strategic stalemate, fundamentally changing the character of the war. For the Romans, the effect was electrifying. The shame of their flight was erased and replaced by a fierce pride and renewed determination. If one man could do so much, what could the entire city not do? Horatius's act served as a rallying cry, uniting the populace and the Senate in a common cause. The defense of the city during the subsequent siege was conducted with a tenacity that would not have been possible without Horatius's inspiring example. He did not just save the city physically, he also saved its soul, reminding them what it meant to be Roman at the moment of their greatest weakness. Horatius, despite his wounds, it is said he was left lame for life, was received with all the honors a young republic could offer. He became a living symbol of duty, fulfilled. However, the true immediate result was the survival of the Republic itself. Without the time he bought, Rome would have fallen that day. King Tarquinius would have been restored, and the Republican experiment would have been strangled in its cradle. The carnage avoided was that of an entire city, and the victory was not military, but existential. Rome, thanks to Horatius, would live to fight another day, and eventually to rule the world. The most enduring legacy of Horatius Cocles was not military, but ideological. His defense of the bridge became the embodiment of the Roman concept of virtus, a complex ideal that blended martial valor with civic duty and moral integrity. It became the story every Roman father told his son, the example every general cited to his troops. The idea that an individual's sacrifice for the good of the state was the highest act of piety became the bedrock of Roman identity. This virtus was the psychological engine that drove the Roman legions to conquer the Mediterranean and statesmen to build a lasting empire. The story became a foundational myth as crucial to Rome as the legend of Romulus and Remus. If the city's founding was the work of demigods, its salvation and the preservation of its liberty were the work of a mortal citizen. This sent an incredibly powerful political message. The Republic did not depend on kings or tyrants, but on the character and determination of its people. Horatius at the bridge became the ultimate proof that a citizen, acting out of a sense of duty, could literally hold the fate of Rome on his shoulders. It became the standard by which all future Roman heroes would be measured and often found wanting. Over the centuries, the legend of Horatius transcended the borders of Rome. It became an archetype of solitary resistance in Western culture. From the defenders of the Alamo to stories of lone soldiers in the world wars, the echo of Horatius's defiance resonates in countless tales of heroism against impossible odds. His story proved that the impact of a brave act is not always tactical or strategic, but is often symbolic, capable of inspiring generations and defining a nation's culture long after the details of the event have been lost in the mists of time. The final impact of Horatius's defense was Rome itself. By saving the city in its infancy, he ensured that the Republican experiment had the chance to grow, evolve, and ultimately shape the course of Western history. The Roman law, architecture, language, and political ideas that emanated from this city-state were only possible because one day, a one-eyed man decided that a wooden bridge was a good place to die. His act did not just save a city. It allowed for the existence of a world that, even today, lives under the long shadow of the civilization he defended. After his heroic act, which saved the Republic from certain annihilation, Horatius Cocles did not ask for gold, nor power, nor a consulship. His reward, granted by an overwhelmingly grateful people, was as humble and earthbound as the very republic he had so fiercely defended. He was granted as much public land as he could plow by himself in a single day. This symbolic gesture not only honored his valor but also reinforced the ideals of a hard-working agrarian society where merit was measured by effort and contribution to the community, not by accumulated wealth. A statue was erected in his honor in the Comitium, the political heart of Rome, so that all future leaders and citizens would remember his sacrifice. He was celebrated in songs and poems, his name becoming synonymous with courage. But his true monument, more enduring than bronze and larger than any field, was the city of Rome itself. Every temple, every forum, every aqueduct built in the centuries to come was raised on the foundation of the survival he had secured. His legacy was not written in stone, but in the continued existence of the civilization he had saved with nothing more than a shield, a sword, and an unbreakable spirit.